what's the status of parametricism? The paradigm is wonderfully evolved through this kind of expert discourse and those who are committed to it, but we remain isolated. Oh, do we all have to go home now? Are we going to be all unemployed because AI takes over? I don't believe that. It will go all into kind of, let's say, into the quality of the output of the discipline and not in shrinking the people. Look, we have 3-4 years. I mean, there's a lot of time and you have a lot of energy as a young student. Now to do this, you can definitely reach somewhere if you want to.
Hi everyone, welcome to PA Talks. In this episode, we're super excited to have Patrik Schumacher, his second time in the podcast. Patrik is a leading architect and principal of Zaha Hadid Architects. He's renowned for coining the term parametricism and has been a pivotal figure in modern architectural design for over a decade and a half. His work continually pushes the boundaries of architecture by integrating new technologies and innovative design methodologies. Join us as we explore Patrik's insight on the evolution of parametricism, the impact of artificial intelligence in architectural design, and the exciting opportunities within the virtual spaces and the gaming industry. We'll also delve into his latest book, Tectonism, and discuss how Zaha Hadid Architects engages with emerging digital realms. This episode is packed with valuable insights for young architects and emerging talents, offering a glimpse into the future of architecture through the visionary lens of Patrik Schumacher. Before moving ahead, let's take a moment and spotlight Pacademy, an online architectural educational platform dedicated to the exploration of parametric design, computational tools, and artificial intelligence in architecture. Pacademy serves as a bridge to advanced design techniques, fostering collaboration with pioneering architects and designers. Through the online courses at the Pacademy, we dive deep into the multifaceted world of computational design, engaging with a wide array of topics that push the boundaries of architecture. You can register and join the live workshops or watch the previous studio workshops recordings. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell notification so you don't miss any new uploads. So if you guys are ready, let's get into the podcast. So thank you so much, Patrik, for hosting us at DHA. It's really nice and an honor to meet you after some years. So thanks for having us.
Good to meet you guys. You're always welcome.
So it's been over a decade and a half since you coined the term parametricism, which has been a pivotal in modern architecture design. How do you envision its evolution in the last couple of years, and especially after the advent of new tools and technologies in architecture?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating when I announced it or realized that there's something with a lot of legs, with a long future. It was after nearly 15 years at that time, already building up from the early to mid 90s and then picking up in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was very strong at the AA, expanded in a whole generation of architects was picking up these tools and ideas and new concepts. Columbia University, of course, the paperless studios, where we're teaching in 93, and then Harvard 94. So it was US and Columbia, London was the main axis. Zaha came on as well. It was very exciting, and when I started to talk about in 2007 at the, let's say, Smart Geometry Conference, and in 2008, the Venice Biennale, writing a manifesto, that was already, interestingly, the point where I thought it should really be the takeoff. And it developed, of course, and kept maturing, but the backlash came after 2008 financial crisis, Occupy Wall Street movement. A lot of this kind of huge kind of boom of construction stopped, and the discourse shifted away from that in many schools of architecture, although the core group at that time had invested 10 years of work, kept going, kept maturing, kept developing it, but it didn't keep expanding, interestingly. So that has been a bit of a regret. But eventually, of course, we accumulated a huge portfolio of projects, other firms as well. Big commercial firms picked up on it. Like there's some number of airports, like the Fuxas Shenzhen Airport or SOM, Mumbai Airport. These are large parametricism project, like our major projects, not only airport and others. So that's been going well, but it hasn't spread in the discipline, in the field. You had the kind of back to basics and back to minimalism. Now we're talking about retro, postmodernism actually, and neoclassicism and historicism kept going. So it remained kind of fragmented. The field remained fragmented, and that's been a bit of a regret. But as I said, the core group, which had built up in some institutions, deepened the research as we went from toying around with software at the very beginning and dynamical systems and for composition, and we applied it to every domain of architecture. Urbanism to create these fantastic urban fields. We had some master plans, but also major building. We're thinking through structure. We're thinking through envelope. And bringing in fabrication. So the big shift, for instance, after in the last kind of 15 years, starting a lot investing in fabrication technologies, where architects became proto-engineers, where architectural studios, some of them, invested in tooling and inventing machines and thinking about fabrication and architecture together, which lay the seeds for what I now call tectonism. Also the integration of the Grasshopper world with all these plugins, which give you early and quick structural logic information, generating, mesh relaxation, shells and tensile forms, things like Rhino Vault, topology optimization. All these tools meant a new kind of excitement and bringing on tectonism. But what I'm missing is this kind of generalization of these techniques and tools, skills, and ways of thinking about architecture. That's why a few years ago, I announced this kind of, in this book, Parametricism 2.0, this AD issue, pointing out that we need to move into explaining more the social functionality advantages of this new paradigm and way of working, and developing also social functionality simulations. So not only the technical aspect, all these wonderful Grasshopper tools and simulation tools, but agent-based simulations, measurement tools, and building up on space syntax. So the geometry of the built environment from the social perspective, from permeability perspective, circulatory perspectives. That's wasn't picked up so much, but I think it made the picture of what parametricism and now tectonism could be and should be much wider, and really becomes a paradigm which I think should clear the market. But it's still not happening, and that's partly to do with, as I said, the post 2008, 2009, we had the European debt crisis, so we had the big crash. Then we had Arab Spring. We have a lot of development problems. We have issues of global conflict, poverty, and so the field, a lot of the students and universities and biennales, etc., became more invested in issues of social justice and development, not the cutting edge, where the metropolis and the advanced society should go, but those who were left behind and how one could help those communities, and that's took the steam out to some extent out of parametricism and tectonism. But again, it kept going. It has wonderful achievements, but the universalization of that paradigm is what I think is still needs to come, because that would really then give it a huge boost in terms of further development and spreading the benefits of such an environment. And particularly, I'm thinking recently more and more about the urban implications of a city, when you have this fragmentation of styles, and you have the sense of every building is its own kind of unique and solitary endeavor. In its agglomeration, it generates a garbage spill, which we see everywhere. So that's one regret, but also that so many buildings that are going up now, they're not participating in the innovations and new subtleties and capacities we've developed, and they're designed and built in ways that could have been designed and built 80 years ago. So that's a big regret. So what's the status of parametricism? The paradigm is wonderfully evolved through this kind of expert discourse and those who are committed to it, but we remain isolated. relatively speaking.
So you spoke about the parametricism and different fragmentations and also different layers that the society has, how to touch with them and how to play a key role. How the architecture that we produce can play a key role in forming a good, innovative space, helps the environment actually. In the book that you published in last year, what are you talking about? What is the core philosophy that you're talking about in the book specifically?
So in the book on tectonism, I show how much it is matured. I call it, it's the inevitable and superior paradigm for contemporary architecture. And under the heading of parametricism and then tectonism in its latest stage, it's really, I think, quite broad and includes everybody who is able to work with the current sophistication which is coming through the engineering disciplines. And if you don't, you can't participate. But anything which comes through, sophisticated structural engineering, sophisticated environmental engineering, sophisticated new material logics and 3D printing, where you can differentiate materials, fabrication technologies of all sorts, where you can imprint the built environment with very efficient fabrication technologies. All of that, whatever comes through there, belongs to tectonism. And it's interesting that you can still recognize this, because when you use optimization tools of various types, you'll never end up with the rectilinear box or with straight beams or with louvers which are endlessly, seriously repeated in terms of brise-soleils. It's always going to be differentiated relative to sun exposure angle or overshadowing of your volume, the internal complexity of flows. There won't be channeled best by a kind of rectilinear corridor, because you have different inputs and outputs, so that space keeps shifting. So by inevitably the outcome would have this kind of sense of organic variation and differentiation, and where things also resonate with each other, where they come together adapt to each other. So this idea of correlating and resonancing with each other will be the outcome, and we have the tool to develop this, and that is recognizable. It's like the endless forms of nature. So basically, it's not prescriptive. It's just say, hey, work in the 21st century way and generate more methodologies and more ways of being intelligent and sophisticated with the 21st century science, computational intelligence, computational power. And this will all become part of the large new umbrella called parametricism, tectonism. So it's sometimes misunderstood, oh, you want everybody to do the same. No, I want everybody to be quite original and unique, because within the realm of parametricism, you have more internal diversity of morphology, of approach, of materiality, of tectonic expression than in all previous styles put together. It is like the endless forms of nature. So, and it is that broad definition. Parametricism or tectonism is anything which really works with the tools of our time, and is also in terms of, for instance, layout tools and organizing social processes in plan. Also, that way we do it now belongs to parametricism. So it's really very open. It's often misunderstood.
Yes.
An oppressive demand that everybody should follow one line of thinking. That's not the way we should put it. It's opening up everybody to the possibilities of today, rather than being restricted to these kind of relatively thin rather than broad corridors of developing architecture which we had historically. And basically all the other styles, all the ways of working are retro in this sense. And that is maybe the key message, one of the messages of the book. And the other message I want to say is that, yes, so we have tectonism developed, but it has so far been, with all its key protagonists, being technologically focused. And I want to shift, again, similar to Parametricism 2.0, we're saying we have to shift out of a technological focus of our endeavors and the way we present this work into something which talks more about the requirements of society, the new dynamism
yes.
of and variation we find in metropolitan societies today, and the issues and problems and tasks which are posed to this, and how we can cope with them, how we can even understand and, let's say, interpret a brief of a complex mixed-use building. We have to model these agents, the thousands of differentiated agent populations, and how they will be distributed and how would they want to interact and meet each other. So this shift into a, let's say, social functionality discourse. And then the big topic is where I think tectonism is so much more interesting than the older versions of parametricism, is when it comes to what I call the semiological project. Because what I believe is all the protagonists, all the who invested in tectonism, people at ETH or at Stuttgart, Achim Menges and his teams and many others, Mark Burry, all of them develop, technologies, materialities, morphologies, Grammatio Cola and so many others. Of course, they're fascinated by the expressiveness, by the richness of expression, which comes into architecture through this. Compared to previous, let's say the earlier version of parametricism, which was NURB surfaces and all in white or gray and smooth, we bringing in these kind of more subtle types of curvature, tensile, compression only, or conic or ruled surfaces, with all these different ways of, for instance, curve folding, different subtle geometries, catenary structures. Curves, they have a particular, and you get a feeling for them, you can sense them, active bending. There's so many different, or inflatable forms. They all have their particular characteristics. So there's so many types of global forms, and then come all these textures, the tool path of the 3D printing, the reticulation of an optimized, let's say, grid shell, perforations, which or different textiles and seaming lines. There's so much coming through of tectonic expressiveness rather than looking at gray, endlessly smooth surfaces, which one could use for articulating a much more varied and rich city. Or even if you take a large project like a Google campus, there's so many different zones and parts and teams and disciplines. You could express one system of design wouldn't work. You can have many different families of types of morphologies, types of materialities, types of ways of fabrication, and integrate them. That is this idea of the expressive richness. And we should also own up as architects, we're not only technically generating space, enclosure, and enough space, but we are characterizing social situation through differentiating the form and materiality, the color, the morphology of spaces, what I call a semiological project. And that is, I haven't many followers in this. So I have tectonism, I have to distinguish tectonism as it exists, yes, and is a wonderful movement with so many protagonists. And then tectonism, what I think it can and should be, a more conscious semiological deployment, articulatory deployment. I mean, we do it intuitively, but more explicitly. That's my teaching in the book. That's the outlook in the book, and some glimpses of examples. So that therefore tectonism has this, that's what we've achieved, and that's what the potential going forward would be. It has these two parts.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan of all these ideologies and methodologies. But there are some people, of course, criticizing this, and they don't agree quite your thinkings. And the ending line is they say technology is not the mean to do the architecture, and to create high quality space you don't have to use specifically maybe so super advanced computational tools. Yes, you can use it, but that's not the mean to just produce architecture.
I have a suspicion. Some of those people who say this,
what is your response to those people?
In those skills. They haven't appropriated the virtuosity of handling and expressing architectural requirements with these means, and so they have kind of restricted repertoires, as if they had kind of some not hands which are very skillful, but two arm stumps and trying to do that, and then they reject They're saying we don't need that, but I think we do need that, and that is a discourse we need to develop, and that's what you also what we do in competitions when you have this solution versus another solution, and to explain the advantages and why are we winning so many competitions, particularly those where we have a chance to stand up and explain urban scale competitions, architectural building scale competitions, because we have more versatility, a wider formal repertoire is a much wider and richer problem-solving repertoire and repertoire of articulating the space. So we have less monotony, we have a lot of efficiency, but we also have this kind of beautiful expressiveness which characterizes a situation, and also the sense of living in the 21st century, rather than in some kind of being invested in nostalgic notions of architecture. And that's really the challenge I have, is I call everything else is retro. And retro is, why would you do that? So I think the lack of skill, and also then the lack of understanding, therefore also the rationality of some of these solutions. I mean, the lightness of, for instance, tensile structure should be obvious, but also shell structures. Environmental engineering, where you have more passive systems operating, learning from the vernaculars of this world. All these aspects, and that's the big difference between older parametricism and newer parametricism, that we can kind of thin out the poche. We have less thick slabs which get in the way of connecting between spaces. We have a lighter structure. We have less machine rooms blocking space and consuming space if we do it right. So it really would be kind of more not only an ecologically lighter footprint, but a light-footedness in terms of having an elegant, more transparent and open space. That's what the promise is. Look, there's not many projects who completely fulfill this, but you get glimpses of this in London. If you go to Hyde Park and our beautiful Serpentine North Gallery, the kind of dematerialization and lightness and openness of that space you get compared to the 19th century heavy masonry, and it's nice to have that contrast. And we also renovated this. And unfortunately, what they're building in London in the last kind of 25 years, and increasingly, is this kind of 19th century world, this kind of heavy brick world, windows getting smaller and smaller, space is getting darker and darker. And I think we're going backwards. And I don't think that is inspiring. So that's my answer. I mean, an invitation to one can go project by project, pros and cons, but I also can go generally saying retro versus future.
So regarding the virtual spaces and the metaverse, what opportunity do you see for architects there, and how is ZHA is involved and is engaging with these new digital realms?
Well, for me, it's really very exciting, and of course, COVID brought it on. You get all these startup companies doing what they've been doing in the physical world, now offering in the virtual world. Zoom took off, and Microsoft Teams, but also a lot of events companies doing virtual events. All our exhibitions, particularly, we had one or two in the COVID period that were just generated virtually as well.
Yeah, our first interview.
And you can visit them, and so we discovered this opportunity I had this dream of cyberspace when the internet first emerged in the early 90s, and actually even in the late 80s, there were architects thinking, and others, this should be a kind of a metaverse. It should be a spatial internet. We could have, in the end, it became a magazine modeled, pages, text, image. You read and you maybe click to another page, but it's not continuous. You have to type in to find something you need. You might get a recommendation, but it's very kind of, and the communication which goes along with this on a social media, you leave a post. It's not real time. It's the world of the magazine and of postings. And I think what the Metaverse promises is really real-time communication. So you gather and browsing spaces with all the different offerings clustering in a city or in a building, like in our Metrotopia, we'll talk about it. That becomes a compelling experience. And
I've been exploring Metrotopia.
And it is, all the design disciplines belong to one discourse. The Bauhaus already had showed that. You have urbanism, architects, interior design, industrial design, graphic design, topography even, etc. And the whole phenomenal world is designers. So, and the web designers were always colleagues in this sense, as well as fashion designers. So I always think of the design disciplines, all those who are forming and creating what I call the phenomenal world. Anything you touch, this cover, this book, this phone, this table, these dresses. I know the designer who, Neil Barrett, their colleagues, they always have to integrate form and function, and they're into this idea of expressing, of communicating. So all design elements, everything which surrounds us was designed by a designer, but also the websites, the interface of these kind of icons here, these are designers, and they have similar problems. You have to find the way in there, you have to navigate, and like you have to find a shop in the city, you have to find the icon or the app on your phone, and there's similar problems. This is becoming dysfunctional. So we always have been, let's say, the internet, I always had designers creating it, but it was the graphic designers. And now it is going to be the architects. And the task of designing virtual spaces is more or less the same of designing physical spaces. Both the architect in the physical as well as the architect in the virtual, they need technical engineering support, and they need to work with some of the technicalities. But the design and we've shown that you can have one-to-one transference of your skills of designing spaces which are easy to navigate, which are legible, which configure in an event in meaningful ways. All these skills, also clustering different buildings together, that they're intervisible, that you can move from one to the other quickly. Maybe in the metaverse you can sometimes fly or move faster,
teleport.
Or you can go through a portal, a wormhole and pop into another space. There's some things which are different, but there's so much which is similar. And the whole idea of us using something like a metaverse to communicate, to find each other, to look at exhibitions, is based on this analogy with the city and with the building. So the architectural analogy drives the internet in the future, like the magazine analogy has driven the current web. So, and we need to therefore have a lot of continuity between the physical world we know and the virtual world we will enter, because we're bringing our knowledge and understanding, we finding things, we're recognizing a situation, we can understand where things might be, find each other, because it's similar to the city, for instance. And that's why we need to bring architects into this. And I think it's a huge opportunity, and we already designed quite a number of virtual spaces. We have this project called Metrotopia, where we're saying, like in the city here, this is, by the way, the design district of London. There's about every second facade is a furniture shop. You might have noticed that there are about 250 furniture shops in the next 5 minutes, and there's Clerkenwell Design Weeks. And it's always been like this. So in the metaverse, you also have design districts. So Metrotopia is basically the virtual design district for the whole world of design. Industrial designers, graphic designers, fashion designers, architects, urbanists, schools of design, schools of architecture, magazines of design, and events and conferences and biennales, which we're hosting there. That's the world of Metrotopia. And yes, 3 miles over there is the financial center, everything financial happening there. And the connections are much less intense than here. Here are the engineers, the architects, the galleries, the furniture companies. And that's the way the virtual cities will also work. And that's what Metrotopia is. And so I'm quite excited about it. And it works because we are having events in Metrotopia every week. We have panel discussions, of a book launch. We had recently a launch of, some company designing flying vehicles, fashion, you've seen that. And it works well enough. It's not yet everybody in this world. That's why it's a bit empty. And so these network effects haven't kicked in, but they will, once they kick in, every organization that has a building or a website will have virtual spaces. So the amount we have to design is going to be monumental, so get ready.
Hopefully. Yes, I've been a part of Metroptopia sometime for joining for a couple of lectures, and you may use as well. So yeah, great space. Congratulations on that. And also there's a growing intersection between architecture and gaming industry, particularly immersive environments. And how do you see this relationship evolving?
Well, I think the relationship is primarily one of technology transfer. So the gaming industry, that's where you have massive multiplayer environments, where you can join a scene, interact with the scene. I mean, in the video games, you shoot each other. And it's fantasy environments.
Yes.
It's primarily, or for me, solely a technology transfer. And so our metaverse has nothing to do with a video game. And there's a confusion in the kind of metaverse industry because at the moment, because this comes out of video gaming, this technology and this idea of being in a virtual space together originates video games and computer games. But when we start using it for serious professional and cultural events, it has nothing to do with it. It's not an escape from your real life. It's a direct continuation of your real life because you meet the same people you've met recently in Shenzhen or in London. You meet there. Your projects you present are the ones you've been you're switching. It's hybrid. It's professional communication. And all domains of life. There will be, life is not a game, right? Yes. So life is serious, and the same purposes we might have, in an exhibition space in Beijing. We had a big show. The same purposes are fulfilled by a virtual exhibition space. We want to show our work, we want to explain our work, for instance, or we want to have a conference, whether physical or virtual. And oftentimes we have hybrid meetings. So, and by the way, it shows up that both Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all the technology companies are investing in metaverse-style virtual work environments. Also, of course, it's also going to be entertainment, so virtual concerts. We are more focusing on, let's say, cultural communication and professional creative industry communication. That's our metaverse. It's nothing to do with video gaming. And firms like Epic, of course, realize that. They have Fortnite, they have a huge, relatively large audience. Metaverses who now think they're making a metaverse and it's still a video game and it's kind of, play to earn and all of that. I think this is totally wrong-headed. Anyway, I'm staying away from this because it confuses the message that Metroptopia, for instance, is a very serious, professional, cultural, a wonderful place where you talk about what your projects are and how you develop your careers. But, so firms like Epic, of course, realize this market of this metaverse, which is not play, but real life metaverse, and therefore it's virtual reality. I'm saying we have physical reality and virtual reality. It's not kind of real versus non-real. This is so huge because it's all our lives and all organizations, spaces and promotions and event hostings, that compared to that, this audience of teenage video game is tiny.
Tiny, yeah.
So we're working with Epic on using the technology and using Fortnite Creative, etc., to do an urban development game in London, and game inverted commas, because it's really meant to show the potential of actual participatory urban development and imagining cities by placing modules, etc., and being 3D involved and through that. So Shajay can tell you more about this probably. So that's the relationship. It's pure one of technology transfer, and the purposes are totally different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And speaking about the current technological advancements, one of them, of course, is AI, and has started to play a key role. So what do you see its potential in the future to change the way we do architecture?
Well, it's it's fascinating. There are two aspects. One is a kind of creativity boosting, which should really have an impact on making us more versatile and creative, because that's true creativity which comes out of that. And the other one is just also, the other thing is productivity. I mean, they're linked. Just generating much quicker, something you might have also been able to do usually by your own imagination and by sketching and so on. But I'm interested in both. So, and we are heavily invested. We have developed, a full research team, crafting our own tools. We already have developed, a direct integration with Rhino. Now we're working on with Maya, that your model, you can immediately generate visualizations. It's something very strategic, but we also like the kind of pure, and we're training up our own kind of LoRa models based on our database to get something more characteristic of us. But it's fascinating how much, and that's great, I think, I have a lot of optimism about this in relative to the development and generalization, which was lacking of parametricism and tectonism, that if you try to Google AI-generated architecture, and just this, without bias, the images which flow at you, I would say 50-60% parametricism, rather than 5-6% parametricism if you just say architecture.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a huge kind of shift towards parametricism. And here's the hint, because it's so easy now, people would like it. They didn't like it when they had to do it themselves and couldn't do it. Maybe now they like it. Maybe there's also some kind of bias in Midjourney, I don't know. But in particular, those who are teaching, there's a lot of advertising. If you Google AI architecture, you get all these images, all this organic, beautiful parametricism, tectonism stuff. And then you get also people promoting their courses, learn how to use AI and prompting and so on. And their examples are always parametricism. And I think that shows something, that the new generation wants this kind of architecture. Once you take away a bit the skill limitations, they all want it. And the other thing is Metaverse. It connects beautifully with Metaverse. Metaverse architecture is also, most of the Metaverses are more parametricism oriented than the real architecture. So the Xene Awards, there was zero parametricism. But again, Metaverse, 50% are kind of parametricism spaces. And also, this comes together this way as well. This avalanche of spaces we will have to design for these virtual cities where everybody will have spaces. And without AI, we couldn't deliver. So AI will play a huge role. And so I see through this kind of sideways, through this new kind of movement, Metaverse and AI, parametricism will in the end also flow back and transform this physical cities. Yeah. Eventually. It will take a while. But I think I see the Metaverse and AI, both of these, see is kind of fantastically boosting parametricism, tectonism. So that's why I love it as well. But tectonism is a much tougher game because you have much more degrees of rationality when you have the particular shell structure, particular skeleton where members have to accumulate. And so that just simply can't do by prompting at the moment with Midjourney or Leonardo. They don't. So it's easier to get a nice volume, a nice kind of surface, light and shadow, perspective, but these kind of structural logics, not yet. But this is only a question of building up the data sets. That's why we're building our own, training our own models so that we can actually prompt proper tectonism sketches. And of course, these are only sketches. But we can also, of course, now we do in whole urban fields of buildings through AI, because you can color code where will be road, where will be water, where will be build forms, where will be high rise, where will be low rise, and you can kind of do it this way. So we have more strategic tools, not only the pure prompting, but also kind of guided and structured development. And so we will have a huge kind of proliferation of creativity and productivity. But I'm not so scared that this will make a lot of architects unemployed.
Not particularly, but you said you are training your own data. You're
Your own
training
networks,
LoRa with your own
based
data
on
sets.
stable diffusion, these kind of LoRa networks, subsidiary networks.
How does that work?
It works. It works nicely. We're using it all the time now. Nothing of this is built yet, and of course it doesn't show up so much because we still have to rationalize these sketches. But you're quicker, and you have a wider field of options, and you open your mind through other interesting compositional possibilities you might have not thought about it. So I do find it very fascinating. So I'm playing around with it. All the teams are playing with it. We have a big kind of Discord with the Midjourney. We have our own stable diffusion. And as I said, we're integrating now in Maya and in Rhino. And particularly under this pressure of faster, quick ideation for competitions, this is very productive. So my experience has been we have this huge productivity gains. When I started 35 years ago, whenever it was, and we had to put the competition together with 20 people drawing and breaking their backs, making sketches and drawings and inking and so on and scratching.
It's amazing.
And, and the result is, very abstract, illegible. What is this? And now we're generating much quicker, photorealistic visions, which are. And that's where the productivity gains. It didn't wait that we now we less people and doing the same thing we did before. No, we're doing so much more certain visions. I mean, the clients are so spoiled now. Everything has to be photorealistically kind of fully presented. Where at the point of competition, for instance, that's where the productivity gains. And then, of course, also in executing that. The complexity, the variability, the cost certainty through BIM, so many things where it was worthwhile to keep all the architects working and more, because in the end the product is so much more sophisticated, so much more, let's say, predictability of what we're doing, because design in the end is only a small part of this huge investment, which is architecture. So it is worthwhile. It doesn't make sense to shrink and save a lot there. So the productivity gains goes into quality and knowing more. So fee as percentage of construction, if anything, in a more advanced country goes up, and it's worthwhile. Because when you spend a bit more on design, you save 3 times as much in the final building and also in the life of the building. I mean, in terms of maintenance, but not only that, running costs, but also, the utilization. So if you design a Google campus, the real cost is not the rent or the maintenance or the energy. It's the salaries of all these thousands of people which you're employing. And if the wrong design means they never meet, they always miss meetings, they don't understand what's going on. So if you can make the synergy while you bring 1,000 people together work, that's the real advantage of good architecture that makes lives more productive. And that's kind of, the payback is kind of tenfold. But to make that argument is not easy, and to trust that argument is not easy, but one can do that through the simulations, etc. So that's where this increase in productivity through AI, and I'm not only meaning image AI, we're also doing machine learned layouts. If we're doing our layouts where you have 5,000 desks of various types laying out onto a floor plate, and making kind of 50 variations of this is all kind of automated. But if you don't do that, you don't know how you should place 25 meeting rooms and 15 entrances. You don't know what you're doing without these tools. So these AI, in a more expanded notion, these kind of agent-based simulations, etc. Also all the genetic algorithms, evolutionary algorithms to optimize things. That's the broader notion of AI. All of that is incredibly important and will mean that there will be better decisions made, better cities, better architectures, better
Built
buildings.
environments.
That's where we'll go. Just because I've always get this question, you didn't even ask it. Oh, do we all have to go home now? Are we going to be all unemployed because AI takes over? I don't believe that. It will go all into kind of, let's say, into the quality of the output of the discipline and not in shrinking the people.
Of course. Regarding all these advancements, and also you have a great experience of teaching in AA, and what changes do you think is necessary in architectural education to adapt with all these advancements and to keep up with the pace of technology?
On the one hand, there needs to be more degrees of freedom in the city. So I've been criticizing the planning paralysis in London, in the UK. China is great, but young students learning architecture here, they don't immediately have jobs in China. Maybe they can come to us and then do work in China. So the first thing is to excite the schools about architecture, about design. There needs to be opportunities when they come out. And that has been maybe one of the reasons, because after this fantastic boom, this kind of stagnation we have, that's why I also became a bit political. We need to kind of need more degrees of freedom. We need to kind of get rid of this planning parameters. We need to kind of energize development. I mean, there's a huge housing crisis in all major cities. So there's this huge demand for building, but somehow it isn't happening. So that's one thing. I think this will influence back onto the schools, because right now the schools, I think a lot of students and studios, they don't really believe that there's real opportunities out there. So they do some kind of counterculture, or they think about all sorts of backward territories and left behind communities and social justice, or about biodiversity, and think of architecture more as a problem, gentrification and how to stop it, making very small interventions, maybe little things or nothing. So there's a kind of lack of optimism, lack of belief in progress and development. There's a lack of buying into the forward-looking optimistic future of the advanced countries, and then the way less developed countries will pick up and will also benefit from an overall development eventually. So that's what I feel has been going wrong a little bit. And that's why you don't find a lot of designs. You find a lot of debates and criticisms of the world we live in, some kind of pessimism executed here. We do absolutely nothing at this point in London. It's just, in a sense, a shame and sad, but we are all over the rest of the world, but Europe is too conservative. A long time. I mean, we used to be on every Venice Biennale in 4 or 5 places. And as we became more kind of established, and this change of atmosphere in the discipline turned against successful firms.
And also,
we're excluded. So, and that's a bit of a shame, because, of course, in DRL we keep teaching, and people have something. They know what they can come here and build, and do great things, and use their skills. But if you don't have that opportunity, that's why I think I can't only blame the schools. It's the whole environment of society, which is not conducive. Although they should, but there's also a bit the ideology of these schools. That's why I'm criticizing the Biennales, and to some extent also schools of architecture, of not being committed to architecture, committed to everything else. And so I think, and then if you go through school like this, you never learn how to design a real project task with the real contemporary complexities, and you don't have the skills of modeling and rendering and making this convincing and compelling, oftentimes. And that then leaves you kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that the discipline you see on the zine and the magazines, it's unattainable for you, or you're not connected with, you reject that. And that's a shame. There's this kind of divide. And, I'm, as a practicing architect, I'm a huge exception in the UK to be teaching, right? So most of the teachers are more academically oriented, they're counterculture, as I said, maybe they're working in an office, but a necessity, and they're alienated there, and they want to do something very different here at the school. That is a shame. There should be more practicing architects teaching where the connection between the actual practice
they can show
and
the
schools.
way.
I mean, I have to say that, yeah, of course, some of the actual practice in London is also a little bit boring. But that's why we need to open up these kind of city planning kind of restrictions also, because otherwise it is a bit too, you don't need that creativity if you can't execute it here. We do absolutely nothing at this point in London. It's just, in a sense, a shame and sad, but
with the scale of the socks and all the projects
all
around the
over
world,
the rest of the world. But Europe is too conservative.
Yes, unfortunately. And well, what do you think? What kind of advice would you share with young generations so they cannot get lost with all these AI tools, computation, parametrics, and also find their own ways into the future?
Well,
of their own career.
Being a positive and optimistic about their field and about the leaders of their field and about the major projects and understanding them and how and thinking about, could I do this? And I'm sure they could, by the way. You can learn it in a year. That's what our teaching demonstrates. And aspiring to contribute. Not to criticize and do small things on the margins, but go right into the center and say, hey, I can do that and I can do it better. And to find out what it takes, you build up some skills. You need to also read about how one could talk about a project like this. What would be the reasoning and explanation and advantages of these kind of projects? That's very important. That's why I think my writing can help with that. My writings can help with this, because I'm not only on the technical level, I'm on the sociological, historical, socioeconomic level, on the level of how contemporary socioeconomic life functions and how architecture fits into this, to get confident about that what one working is makes sense. It's not only groovy and cool, but also it has advantages for society and makes sense. So to go right at it, and of course you have to have a ideally a conducive environment where you maybe work with some colleagues and teams, like what we're doing in DRL. You can do it on your own as well. And you can do it because I think look, you have 3-4 years. I mean, there's a lot of time and you have a lot of energy as a young student. Now to do this, you can definitely reach somewhere if you want to. Yes. And you should reach for, seeing, I mean, that's what I did anyway. Seeing yourself as the, future highly successful. Oh, I love how these guys do, but I can do more. I can do that too. And I think that's more of a state of mind. And I think all these, YouTube tutorials, I mean, even if you don't have your direct tutor helping you or you're not in the perfectly conducive environment, you can still self-teach. You have 3-4 years. God, of course, you can come out absolutely top. And now you can self-publish. You can render. You can use all the tools and means, AI and Grasshopper and everything. And you can publish out images and videos of your project, which put to shame, 90% of contemporary architects. You can do that as a student. You just have to want to do it. Yeah, and I can show you what I'm so proud of what my students achieved last year. If you look that up, we did this kind of whole part of East London. And so a small team of 3-4 people designed, a whole district of London with a high degree of sophistication, a lot of detail, fly-throughs. I mean, it's amazing when you learn all these skills and tools, how far you can reach. And I would say I would publish this project
on PA
under Zaha Hadid. They could step in here and do this same project and publish it as a kind of competition. Unfortunately, in England there are not such competitions. We do very similar things in China, but I think what you can do as a student in a year, of course, is more than what a professional team can do because we only have 6 weeks. So that advantage, so you have time to learn the skills. You have time to go over the project again and again and build out and build up something which is very impressive. So that's what my advice to students is. You can do your final thesis project at the end of your study should beat everything which is there in the world of architecture at this point, and you can render it out as if it was built, right? So that's the fascinating thing, and you can throw these images up on Instagram, and your project goes viral 5 times more than our latest build. I mean, that can be done. And that's I find fascinating because that's the competition. Everything is on Instagram or on Facebook and design quickly, and everybody can see everybody else's. And a rendering, you can't hardly see the difference between a photograph building and the rendering. And so you can jump to the top of the field.
Well, thank you so much for your time. The great discussion. I appreciate joining
My pleasure.
our
It's
series.
always nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it a lot. Again, I want to spotlight Pacademy, an online architectural educational platform that spreads the idea of using parametric design, computational tools, and artificial intelligence in architecture. You can register and join the live workshops or watch the previous studio workshops recordings. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss any new uploads. Thank you so much for watching the episode. Hope to see you soon in the future episodes.